Hello guys, I'm Unstable Voltage. Welcome to my Europa Universalis 4 tutorial. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at armies and navies. I'm not going to be concentrating much on the actual combat side of things, but more just how to build and manage your armies and navies, how to control them, how you can split them, merge them, reconfigure the units and what their basic uses are and things like that. I will be covering a few things that I've gone over in other videos, and there'll be a few things that I'm just going to gloss over because they'll be covered in future videos. And because of the way these videos are done, some people aren't going to watch all of them. They're just going to watch the ones that they feel is relevant to what they need to learn. So do bear with me if I start going over something that I have already gone over in another video, but I will try and avoid doing that as much as possible. Before we start, one thing that's very useful to learn, a brilliant screen with a lot of information, is the military screen. You can get to that by either clicking on the shield in the top left hand corner or hitting F1, and you can get to this tab by clicking the little helmet with the sword through it. If that one isn't selected, you can also just press 0 once you are on once you've hit the shield and brought this window open. You can hit 0 to go to the military screen. Now, this gives you a lot of useful information because it shows you which type of land units you have. It tells you what their cost is, so how much it costs to hire one of these regiments, and it also, if you mouse over, tells you their monthly cost. For each of them, it tells you their combat ability, it tells you what their fire is, what their shock is, and also how many units you have of that type. Same for the different types of ship. It tells you their cost plus their monthly maintenance, what your combat ability is, how many cannons they have, as in how much damage they can do, their hull size, as in how much damage they can take, and how many of each you have. You also got some other interesting information here as well. You can see how many leaders you have, as well as how many leaders you're allowed to have. And you can also see things here such as your army tradition, morale and force limit, your naval tradition, morale and force limit, and a few other bits and pieces that we will cover more when we start talking about the actual combat side of things. So even though this video is called Armies and Navies, we're actually going to go ahead and start with the navies because they are a little bit easier to understand. So one of the first things you're going to need to know is what your naval force limit is. Now there's two ways you can find that out. You can either go into the screen we've just talked about and you can see your naval force limit down here. As you can see, it says my naval force limit is 33. And it says that my current force is 27. So I'm 6 ships below my current force limit. Now it also tells you why I've got such a force limit. I'm getting +6 for being an independent nation, and I get plus 27.08 from provinces. Sounds a little bit weird because it's got that 0.08, but force limit is affected by your total development. So there is a little bit of decimalization going on in there, and things are rounded down. Can also be affected a little bit by local autonomy as well. So if you've got provinces with higher autonomy, you might get slightly less force limit. So it should be obvious, but I will point it out because some people don't realise. You only get naval force limit from coastal provinces, and also you can only build ships in coastal provinces. That said, you will often find that there are landlocked nations which do have a naval force limit, and a lot of that comes back down to that base of 6, independent nation. So if you're an independent nation, you automatically get +6 to your naval force limit, even if you don't have a single coastal province. So we can see how many ships we've got here, and there's 4 types. Now ignore the names because the names change as they improve via technology. But you will see there's 4 different types. There are heavies, there are lights, there are galleys, and there are transports. Those are the 4 different types of ship. Now currently we have some of all, except we don't have any galleys. We don't really want galleys because we don't really need them, and I'll explain why shortly. So let's say we wanted to build some ships. There are 2 different ways we could build a ship. We could either left click on a coastal province, and then we have this button here that says build ship. Now, there's actually one for recruit regiments and hire mercenaries as well, so it's done in the same way. And it also shows us here if there are any ships or units queued for construction. Currently there aren't, so we can click build ship, and then it will bring up this window and it will show me the 4 different types of ship I can build here. It gives me the information about the ship, such as if they have any trade power. Only light ships have trade power. and then it shows me what their hull size is, the number of cannons, and the speed that they can move. As you can see, your heavies and your transports are the slowest, your lights are the fastest, and galleys are somewhere in between. And if I wanted to build a certain ship, all I have to do is go ahead and click on that, and it will add it to the queue. I can go ahead if I want to and click on more ships and add them to the queue, and then we can go ahead and click it to cancel it. Now, if you cancel the construction, you do get the money back. Ships don't cost manpower. The only thing it requires to build a ship is the money to do so. Now, the problem with doing this is you can only see one province at a time. An easier way to do it is to actually open the production interface here, which is a little crossed hammer and sword beneath the shield, and then click on the Naval Units tab, which is the second one down. Now, what this allows you to do is if you actually go ahead and select a naval unit, so let's say I want to select a transport here, if I go ahead and click on the transport, you'll see the map changes. So all of the red provinces are provinces where I can't build ships, and in this case it's because they're all landlocked, they're not coastal. But you can now see all of my coastal provinces, even the ones overseas, and you can actually see how many days it would take to build a ship in each of these provinces. Now, these build times and costs as well are offset by a number of things. Mostly, they are going to be offset by... let's just get back out of that. If you end up in this build ship screen, you can get back out of it with a little back button at the bottom there. So if you use provincial development to increase the diplomatic or the production development of a province, it will actually reduce the local shipbuilding time. So it increases the speed at which ships are built. There's also a number of buildings that you can get in coastal provinces that are specifically for Navy. There's actually two lines. There's the dock and the dry dock, and there's the shipyard and the grand shipyard. The dock and the dry dock increase your naval force limit, so they allow you to build more ships, to actually have more ships. The shipyard and the grand shipyard reduce the shipbuilding time, they reduce the ship cost, and they increase the speed at which the ships repair, because any ship that takes damage does need to be repaired. So that's how you can actually improve the building time and reduce the cost, as well as the fact that there are some technologies and also some idea groups that do reduce ship cost and reduce training or build speed and things like that. So like everything in EU4, there are lots of modifiers that can affect that. So the easiest way to build ships for most people is going to be to bring open the production interface, click on the naval units, click the type of ship you want to build, and then you can see which provinces that you can build the ships in. And you can either go ahead and click the little plus button, which will add one to the queue. You can click that multiple times and build several ships in one place, but bear in mind if you go ahead and do that, they'll build one after another. So it's 350 days per ship. So in total, that's going to take 1,050 days to build all three. So what you want to do is build one in each province. Excuse my voice there. So what you'd want to do is build one in each province, and then you could get several going at the same time. And again, you can cancel them by clicking on the little minus symbol there. So those are the different types of ways that you can actually build a ship. So now you've got some ships, what can you actually do with them? Well, there's actually a couple of different things you can do. First of all, let me just explain what the different types of ships are and what they do. So let me just go back into the production interface again, actually. So your heavies, these are your main ships for combat. They're the slowest moving ships, but they can take the most damage and they can deal the most damage. If you're going to get in a naval battle with someone, you want to try and have a lot of heavies. The downside with heavies is they're very, very expensive. They're not just expensive to build, but they're also expensive to maintain. Your light ships are used for several things. They are the fastest ships you have. They are used for protecting trade, which I covered in the previous video, tax and trade. And they are also used for privateer missions, which again I did cover briefly in the last video. We'll just skip galleys for a moment and go to transports. Transports do have some combat ability. They do have some cannons, but they're very squishy. You shouldn't really use them in a fight, really. But if you do have them as part of the Navy, their cannons will be added to the battle. So, you know, they're not completely defenseless. But the main purpose of a transport, as the name suggests, is to move troops around. And then you've got galleys. A galley is quite similar to a light ship, but it can't protect trade. But the advantage of a galley is it actually gets a combat bonus, receive 100% bonus to damage dealt to non-galleys if they are in inland seas. So by inland seas, we're talking of things like the Mediterranean Sea here, the Agatean Sea, the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea. So anything that's an inland sea, galleys would be more effective against non-galleys. That said, they'll still get completely wrecked by heavies, and it's quite easy to get enough light ships and gang up on galleys. They're not all that good, even if you've got a fair sized fleet of them, because you only need probably about 20% more lights in the opposing fleet, and it'll take a load of galleys down. I generally don't ever build galleys, not that I play very often with provinces who have access to inland seas, but galleys isn't really something that I ever really bother about. As you can see also on this screen, it also tells you how many ships you have in production as well, because I did queue up that extra transport down there, so you can see that that transport is in production. So when you build your ships, like I mentioned in the last couple of videos, you don't ever want to go over your force limit, because if you do go over your force limit, then it's going to get really, really costly. If you bring open the shield and click on the economy tab, which is number 3, you'll actually be able to see what your fleet maintenance is, and you can see just how much money you are paying per month to maintain your fleet. Now, same as you can do with armies, you can reduce the fleet maintenance down, which will save you some money, but at the same time it will also reduce the morale of your navies, and it will reduce the effectiveness of your trade power. So one thing that they added in, I believe it was at the Art of War expansion, is the ability to mothball ships. So if you have some ships that you don't want to use, now we've actually got 2 navies here on top of one another. If I keep clicking, it cycles between them. One of the navies here has 11 lights, as we can see up here. The other navy has 7 heavy ships and 9 transports. So what you can do with these is you can actually split off a particular type of ship. So if I actually mouse over there, as it said, Z or left click, detach all the units of this type and select them. Shift and left click would detach all units of this type and add them to the current selection. And right click would detach all units of this type. So let me just go ahead and grab the other navy that's just got the light ships in. Let me just go ahead and move them to another port. We're just going to move them out of the way, just so things are a little bit easier. Ignore stuff that's going on with the game in the background. I've just started this to show you how it works. So we've got this navy selected here. We've got the 7 lights and we've got the 9 transports. So if I go ahead here and left click, what it's now done is it's detached all the heavies, and I just have the heavies in this particular little navy here. If I go ahead and just put them all back together and I shift and left click, then that's basically split them apart, but it's selected both of the navies. So I actually have both navies selected. I could also select all 3 of the navies, including the one in the other province. Now, the way to do that is normally if you just drag a box, left click and drag a box, it selects your land units. But if you hold control and left click and drag a box, it will select your naval units. So as you can see, we now have 3 different navies, and 2 of them are in the same port. They're on top of one another, and the 3rd one is over here. So this is a good way to learn some of the useful things that you've got in here. First of all, if I just want to select one specific navy, say I just want to select my heavies, I can just go ahead and hit the select button there, and that will just select that one navy. If I wanted to go ahead and just deselect one of the navies, let's say I want to go and deselect this navy over here, which is my lights, I could find that navy, which is just here, it's Blue Squadron, and click close, and that will deselect them. Now what that's now done, it's lit these 2 buttons up at the top, which are the reorganize and the merge buttons. So merge button is quite straightforward. It just basically takes the 2 units and puts them together. Now, I usually do that with a shortcut key. The shortcut key that I use for doing that is G. It's the default key. I like to remember it as G for group, although it doesn't really group, it merges them together. So you can hit G and put them together. The other thing that you can do if you have several navies or several units is you have the reorganize button, which basically brings this screen up and allows you to move ships or move units between the two different armies or navies, and you can close that window or select one of them. So you can move individual units by clicking the arrows, or you can move entire stacks. If you click, you transfer all the units of that type. If you right click, you only transfer half the units of that type. Let's go ahead and just put that navy back together there so it's all in one piece. You can also get into a similar screen if you actually hit the Create New Unit button, which will give you an empty window on the right hand side and allow you to transfer any units you want into the other one, and that will create a new unit, either an army or a navy, depending on what you have selected, and you'll have those units in there. So that's pretty much how you manage putting units together. Another handy button that you've got up here is this one, the Split in Half button, and the shortcut key for that is S. So if you split in half, what it will try and do is it'll take the army or the navy and try to split it in half and give you two roughly equal units. If I just go ahead and select both of them up, as you can see, one of them has 3 heavies and 5 transports, and the other one has 4 heavies and 4 transports. Simple reason for that is we didn't have an even number of ships. So it does try to split them up roughly evenly, but it's not always going to work. So a couple of other useful buttons. First of all, you have this Disband Unit button. Disbanding a unit gets rid of it completely. It doesn't return anything to you, so you don't get any of the money back. You also, if you're disbanding an army, don't get any manpower back. We'll talk about that shortly. But it does, of course, mean you don't have to pay for the maintenance costs of those units anymore. One thing you can do, as I was saying, if you have the Art of War expansion, I think it was added in Art of War, is you can actually go ahead and mothball ships you don't want. So let's say I don't really want to use my heavies. I'm going to go ahead and click on the heavies to separate them, and then I've got this button here that says mothball. Now, as you can see, all of my heavies currently at 100% health, so they haven't taken any damage. If I go ahead and mothball my heavies and then unpause the game, it probably won't tick over until the end of the month. Let's just go ahead and speed things up. Hopefully we won't get any war declarations or any junk like that on us. But as you can see, they've actually started to take damage, and this is because they aren't being maintained. Any ships that are mothballed will take damage every month until they get down to 25%. At 25% it caps out and they won't get any lower than that. If you then want to use those ships, you have to unmothball them. They'll go back up to full maintenance and they will start to get repaired. Now, in order for a ship to repair, it has to be left in a port. And depending on whether or not that particular province has a... forgotten what type of building it is now. It's the shipyard. If a province has a shipyard, it can repair the ships more quickly. But you can take them out of port and fight with them or do stuff with them, even when they're only at 25% health. Remember, health isn't the same as morale. It's a lot more risky because you're starting with a lot of ships that are already damaged, but you can go ahead and do that. So what else can you do with ships? What are the other options you have? Well, first of all, we've got the lights. The lights are probably the most versatile ships that you have. So let me just quickly run through the interface and just tell you what you've got up here, what other things that you can do. So you have the option, we'll start up here, you have the option to detach a blockade. This is something that you can only do if you are at war, and you don't just need light ships to blockade, but blockading is basically where you put your ships in the sea where an enemy province has one of their ports, and it will blockade that province. Doing so has several effects. It basically makes it easier. It gives you a bit of war score and makes it easier for you to take the province with a siege, but we'll talk about that in another video. You've also got, but what detaching a siege does is, because you only need a certain number of units in a particular sea to get a 100% blockade. So what you can actually do, let's say you've got more ships than you need, you hit the detach blockade button and it will leave behind the number of ships required to give you 100% blockade, and the rest of the ships you can move on. And we've also got another button here that says detached damage. So none of our ships here are actually damaged at the moment, but if you actually did have a damaged ship or a number of damaged ships, you could just say, look, just detach the damaged ones, and the shortcut key is A. And you can leave the damaged ones in the dock while you move the rest of the fleet out. Another useful thing, not a lot of people know about this, but if you have an army or a navy selected and you actually click on the name up here in the top left hand corner, you can actually go ahead and rename the army or the squad. Very, very useful. Remember to hit enter just to set that in. And What's good about that is it will actually appear up here on the outliner, so you can instantly see where that particular navy or army is. Very useful if you're setting lights as a trade fleet, because if you want to remember what trade node you had them in, you can go ahead and call it like trade channel or trade Lubeck, just so you know where they were going. So you've got a couple of other buttons here. Attached to unit is pretty similar to a button that you have as, well, it's exactly the same actually as a button you have as an army. Attaching to unit, if you tick this box, it basically allows any of your AI allies to attach their navy to yours and follow you around. So it basically means that they just sort of form up with you and follow you. Go home at war should be fairly obvious. If you are at war, then the ships will automatically go to port and stay there until the war ends. Very useful if you've got ships that are out somewhere that is a little bit dangerous, and if you get declared on, you want those ships to come back home and not have to worry about being taken down. So the other buttons that you have here, create new unit, we've already gone through. Then we've got the option to protect trade, which you can only do with light ships. And again, I spoke about that in the previous tax and trade video, so go and watch that. Then you've got the there are no friendly units here to allow attachment. Now, if I was in a sea that had a friendly navy in, then this would light up. And this is the same button with armies as well. You have the same button there. What this allows you to do, just as clicking attach to unit allows somebody else's navy to attach to yours, if you click this button, it allows your navy to attach to theirs. So that would basically mean, say you're in a war with somebody, you've got an ally with a big navy, you put your ships in the same sea as theirs and click that button, your navy will follow their navy around and just help them out. You don't have to do anything about that. You've then got this button here that says start patrolling. Now, patrolling isn't really something that you need to do all that much since Wealth of Nations. It was mainly used to just patrol the seas to get rid of pirates. Now, the good thing with patrols is you don't actually need to use light ships. You can use any ship type, including heavy. In order to patrol, you just select the ships you want, you click the start patrolling button, and then you go and right click, not left click. So you click the start patrolling button, and then you go and right click where you want them to patrol to, and those ships will literally go out to the patrol point, they will turn around, and they will then come back in after a short amount of time. So let me just go ahead and pause some things up as well. What else can you do with light ships? You have the option to detach any ships that are obsolete. So what you will actually end up with is you will end up with some ships, as you increase in technology, some of your ships will become old and outdated. You can actually see what the ships are on here, but as you get newer ships, your old ships become outdated, and you can actually issue the order to detach all of the ships which are obsolete, so you can send them off and get them upgraded. You've also got the option to enable and disable automatic transportation. That's not going to work with lights, that is only going to affect your transports. Automatic transportation dictates whether or not these ships are allowed to automatically transport troops, and that's something I'll talk about very, very shortly. You also have a couple of other options here. You have the option to upgrade the ships. If there are ships in the fleet which are obsolete and you've got them in a port, you can click this button to get them upgraded to the latest ship type. Obviously, that's going to cost you a little bit of money. Then you've got the send on a privateering mission, and again, you can only do that with light ships. That is something that I talked about in the tax and trade video. We've seen the mothball button. You have an option on transports to allow allied armies to board the ship. So you can actually let your allies use your transports, essentially. You've then got the option to hunt pirates. Hunt pirates is very, very similar to patrolling, but you're specifically going off and looking for pirates, and you will automatically try and kill them. And again, that is something that you can do with any ship type. And then finally, you've got this option down here to go on an exploration mission. Now, you can only do this if you have the El Dorado expansion, and you will need an explorer, which is one of your leaders, to be able to do that. Now, you can see that these light ships have actually taken some damage, and that is because they're actually getting attrition. And this is because they are spending time at sea, and they are in the open sea. So all ships take attrition while they are away from port. As you can see, they've already started taking damage. If we bring them back into a friendly port, they will actually start to recover a little bit. Now, a friendly port is any port that you own. It's any naval, any coastal province that you own is basically a friendly port. Any coastal province owned by one of your subjects is a friendly port. If you're at war with somebody and you have occupied one of their naval provinces, that counts as a friendly port. And if you go to any other nation and go to their diplomacy screen, and under access actions, you can ask for fleet basing rights. Anyone that's willing to give you fleet basing rights, then their coastal provinces count as a friendly port. So that's where you can go ahead and repair. It also works for certain things like your trade distance and your naval supply distance. So that's our trade range, trade efficiency. Where's our naval supply? Colonial range. It's all increased by how close you are to an unblockaded port. So it's good to have ports all around. As for anything else, moving navies around manually is just as simple as selecting them and just right-clicking where you want them to go. You can queue up several moves if you hold down the shift button and click multiple times, so you can actually queue up a complicated path for units to take. That applies to armies as well. Another useful thing to know is something that's been added in the Common Sense expansion, which is if you start to move between two seas or two provinces, once you get halfway between them, you actually become movement locked. So at the moment, it says I will arrive in the North Sea, which is this one up here. I will arrive on the 22nd of January, which is 3 days away. At the moment, I can actually click back on Dogger Bank, right-click on Dogger Bank, and cancel the movement because I'm not committed. So if I just go ahead again and try and move, and once again if I mouse over it says I'll arrive on the 28th of January, so it's going to take me 5 days. If we wait until the 27th of January, we're now actually locked, and you can see that the arrow has turned turned grey, and we've got this little padlock icon next to the flag. Now that means that we're already most of the way there. So we can't cancel that. We can tell them to come back, but they're still going to get all the way there before stopping, turning round and coming back. And we want to go ahead and return to port. Now, another little useful thing that a lot of people don't realise that you can do, and this applies to both navies and armies, is you can actually set control groups like you used to be able to in old real-time strategy games. So if you select an army or a navy, and then you hold control and hit one of the number keys, so I'm going to hit control and 1, that will actually set a control group. Now, as you can see, that the Royal Navy that I have selected here, which is just the transports, that actually says 1, because that's control group 1. So if I don't have the navy selected and I hit number 1 key now, it will automatically select that navy. Even if I'm off the screen and I can't see them, hitting 1 will select them. If I hit 1 again, it will actually go and center my view on them. And that works for armies as well, so it's a very, very useful button. So finally, the last thing to really cover here is the transports, which we're going to take. Obviously, we can pick them with number 1. We can put troops on them. Putting troops on transports is quite easy. They need to be in the same province as the troops. So we've got this little guy standing here in London. So providing that we actually have a transport here, and we do, I can select this guy and I can click the button on the army that says attach to transport. With that button selected, what I can now do is I can pick up my transports and tell my transports to go to another province. Not those ones, I want the actual transports, not the... Have I got the wrong navy selected? Yeah, there we go. So there's the transport. So we'll click on Calais, for example. Now, as you can see, that regiment has now gone from London. And we can actually see that we are carrying 1 regiment and we have space for 8 more. It actually tells us that information up here on the Navy screen. So as soon as our Navy manages to land over here, and we can actually speed things up a little bit. It does take a little bit of time to get there, but as soon as the Navy manages to land here, then it automatically drops off our troop. And that's basically how you use transports. You can only move 1 regiment of troops for every transport ship that you have. Now, this automatic transportation, the way that works is if I turn around and select this army and say move to Calais, there's no way they can get to Calais because they can't walk across. However, if I right click, it says, would you like to use the Royal Navy, which is currently in Calais, to automatically transport the Army of Scotland that's currently in Essex to Calais. If I say yes, then what's going to happen is these guys are going to do something which is a little bit odd. They will move out onto the ship, but what actually happens is the ship moves into the sea. and they go out onto the ship via boats. Now, you can do this manually if you wanted to. There's a better way of demonstrating this, which is what I'm going to do. As you can see, it's actually split the army up into smaller stacks so that they will actually all be able to fit on the transports. I'm just going to go ahead and group all of those guys together. In fact, they're now committed, so I can't actually stop that movement. I want to go ahead and move these ships back down to the Straits. Now these guys have to cancel their movement. So I'm going to group them all up, move them all down to Kent, so I can demonstrate how this works. Let's just speed things up until everybody gets where they're supposed to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these guys and put them into Co. So there's a couple of different ways of doing it. The quickest way of doing it assumes that you can actually dock your ships. Let's just go ahead and let's take a single transport to demonstrate this. So I've got a single transport. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dock that transport in Kent. I'm now going to go ahead and I'm going to detach a single infantry. And that single infantry is going to go on to my transport. So if I tell this transport to take this infantry to Calais, it's currently the 16th of March, and it's telling me that it will arrive. But it's not been very helpful at all. Let's wait for it to get out into the sea. So it is going to arrive in Co on the 19th of March. So it's taken 3 days. 18th, 19th. There we go. 3 days, and we got our troop across. Nice and easy. The other option you've got, though, is you can actually just leave the ship out there in the water. Let's just move that other fleet out of the way. Just so it's not in... It's a bit of a busy sea, this. So there's a lot of units around. So now I'm going to go ahead and select another single cavalry. Another single infantry. But this time, instead of actually moving the ship into port, we're just going to actually click on Co. And what he will do is he will actually sort of not wade, but, you know, get in some rowboats, go out to the ship, and then row back to Co. And as you can see, it's actually going to take him until the 9th of April to get to the Straits of Dover. It's currently the 28th of March. We just go up, there's the 9th of April, and it's going to take him until the 21st of April to get to Co. So 3 days to transport a unit if you actually dock, and almost a month if you just let them cross using this method. Unfortunately, this is the method that the game decides to use if you allow automatic transportation, even if they are able to dock, which is a little bit silly. So for that reason, I tend to transport all of my troops around manually. So that's basically navies and everything that you can do with them. And I appreciate that this video has gone on for quite a while. So I'm actually going to split this video up, and then the armies will be in the next video, which will be separate. That said, a lot of the way armies work are very, very similar to the way navies work, but we will go through and cover that in the next video. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hope you're still finding these tutorial videos useful, and I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye for now.